Today, we wrap up my review of the prequel trilogy with Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Obviously, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I think most of you probably figured that out by now. So we're going to go over my review. We're going to go through the episode, so there will be spoilers, obviously. My thoughts, my views, and opinions regarding Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And you're welcome to chime in below in the comment section with your thoughts, your views, and opinions regarding Episode 3, the finale of the Star Wars prequel series, below in the comment section. Love to know what you think and how you rank Revenge of the Sith. So, Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005, written and directed by George Lucas, and it was actually the first Star Wars film to be rated PG-13. And I still remember when I went to go watch it, opening night, by the way, with some friends, and we got our tickets in advance, and we were all excited. Even though Attack of the Clones wasn't great, it still wasn't bad enough to deter us from wanting to see the conclusion of the prequel series. So we showed up, packed house, sold out across the country in theaters, and the beginning was very epic. You had the typical thing, Lucasfilm. At the time, you had the opening with 20th Century Fox, then Lucasfilm, then long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, then Star Wars, the music by John Williams, who always does great scores, and then, of course, the opening crawl, and it was awesome. Probably one of my best opening scenes in Star Wars. I would probably put it right below A New Hope's opening scene, because obviously that's technically the first Star Wars movie we ever see. But it's epic because you have the Republic Star Destroyer, the Venator, it's a Venator, and you have two Jedi Starfighters flying above it. And then all of a sudden, as it pans across the one Star Destroyer below, you see Coruscant, and you see this epic battle happening between Republic and Separatist forces, and you have the John Williams music in the background just kicking into high gear, and it's a great battle that begins the Episode 3, and the projector broke. Yes. So we were probably about, I would say, like maybe 5 minutes into the movie, still in the battle scene where Anakin and Obi-Wan were heading towards, General Grievous's flagship in order to rescue Chancellor Palpatine, and then the projector fucking broke. It overheated. Something happened to it. And, some moviegoers were compensated. They were given, vouchers to come back in a few days or in the weekend in order to get another chance to watch Episode 3. By the way, this was a midnight showing. But me and my friends were like, nope, we're here. We're staying right here. And so I would say at least maybe 2 hours went by. 1 or 2. It felt like an eternity before they finally fixed the projector and they got the movie starting back up again. So that is my Star Wars Episode 3 story when I went to go watch it on opening night, back when I was still in radio in 2005. And it had a great cast, Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I think Ewan really shines in Episode 3. I mean, he's been good in Episode 1 and 2, but Episode 3 is where Ewan McGregor really, stands tall as Obi-Wan and establishes himself as that iconic role that was first played by Alec Guinness. And then, of course, you have Aiden Christensen, who reprises the role of Anakin. He does a much better job this time in Episode 3 than he did in Episode 2. And then, of course, you have Ian McDiarmid, who is phenomenal in Episode 3 as Palpatine, and, of course, Darth Sidious, the Emperor. He steals the show. There's a lot of show stealing in Episode 3. I say a lot of it's between Ewan and Ian, as well as Frank Oz voicing Yoda. And Hayden had some moments, too. And, of course, the lovely Natalie Portman comes back as Padme. Samuel L. Jackson has some good moments, too, as Mace Windu. Some battle scenes between him and Palpatine. And then, of course, the late Christopher Lee as Count Dooku. You had Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa, along with Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, Kenny Baker in R2-D2, the late Kenny Baker, and some alums from the original trilogy in Anthony Daniels as well as Kenny Baker. Overall, a decent job by the cast of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And so most of you know the story. 3 years after the events of Attack of the Clones, the Clone Wars has been going on for quite a while now. And in the last desperate effort to try and win the war against the Republic, Grievous and Dooku launch an invasion of Coruscant. They manage to kidnap Palpatine. And of course, Anakin and Obi-Wan rescue Palpatine. Anakin kills Dooku. And then eventually they escape. And everything transpires where, there's obviously some things going on where Palpatine continues to gain power. The Jedi doesn't like it. And Palpatine now wants Anakin on the Jedi Council. So, as his eyes and ears and voice of the Republic. And, of course, Anakin's honored by this. But at the same time, the Jedi Council, which throughout its history voted for its own members to be on the Jedi High Council, they reluctantly agree to it. But they deny Anakin the rank of Master. And, of course, Anakin kind of doesn't like that because, what's the point being on the Jedi High Council if you don't have the rank of Jedi Master? At this point, Anakin is a Jedi Knight, and if you go by the events of the Clone Wars TV series, which is wrapping up as I'm recording this video, there's a few episodes left of Clone Wars, but it all fits together. The 3 episodes, episode 1, 2, and 3, as well as the Clone Wars, make up, I would call, the prequel saga. But he is a Jedi Knight, and he is a general in the Republic Army, and he's a war hero, and he's one of the best Jedi that they have in the Order. But they don't like the idea of Palpatine, wanting to force Anakin on the High Council, and so they just reluctantly agree to it. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Padme and Anakin are pregnant with a baby, even though they're still secretly married. They're having this little back and forth about Anakin having nightmares about losing her in childbirth. And just like with his mom in episode 2, he doesn't want it to happen, and he's willing to do almost whatever it takes to prevent Padme from dying in childbirth. And that's where Palpatine really starts to pull his strings on Anakin, even though he's been doing it all along. The front of Palpatine has been the humble senator from Naboo, turned Supreme Chancellor, and behind the scenes, as some of you know, and I haven't really talked much about it in episode 1 and 2, he's also Darth Sidious. So he's been the puppet master behind the whole war, behind the blockade of Naboo, which has led to ultimately the rise of the Separatists and the Clone Wars. And the end goal is to bring about a new order, the Galactic Empire, and ultimately destroy the Jedi. And, ever since he encountered Anakin on Naboo, of course, he first encounters Anakin in episode 1 on Coruscant. And so ever since then, he always sensed, the potential in Anakin, and he's been Anakin's mentor ever since Anakin became a Padawan over, a 10, 13-year period. And so now you have Palpatine, making his move, with Dooku out of the way, and basically the Separatists on the ropes. They're hiding in the Utapau system, and Anakin is given information by Palpatine as to the whereabouts of General Grievous, and he presents it to the council. Of course, Palpatine, being the chess player that he is, making some 4D moves, has made it to where, he wants the council to do something different, like some reverse psychology stuff. So he recommends to the Jedi High Council that Anakin leads the attack on Utapau in order to bring down Grievous. Of course, the Jedi Council doesn't like this. They fall into the trap, and they send someone else instead. They send Obi-Wan Kenobi. At this point, even though Obi-Wan Kenobi is a Jedi Master, and Anakin still recognizes him as his master because, he was his master. They're more like brothers now. They're on more equal footing than they were in, say, episode 2. And you can obviously tell that Anakin has grown, from the ending of episode 2 to the start of episode 3. You can tell that there's a difference. He's a little bit wiser. He's a lot more experienced. He has a physical scar from battle. And, like I said, he's a pretty hardcore veteran, general and knight in the Clone War era. So they part ways while Obi-Wan leads the strike team along with Commander Cody to Utapau to try and end the war by destroying or capturing Grievous. Meanwhile, Anakin's left on Coruscant, and all this time you have Palpatine continuing to manipulate Anakin, and eventually, Palpatine decides to tell Anakin the truth, to reveal his true self to Anakin, that he is Darth Sidious, that he is Lord of the Sith, and that he can help save Padme's life. And at first, Anakin's against it. He doesn't want anything to do with Palpatine now. He feels betrayed, because he is a Jedi and he is sworn to destroy the Sith. So at first, he goes to Mace Windu and he reveals the terrible truth that the Sith Lord that they've been hunting for all this time, ever since Episode 1, is in fact Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. As a result, he has regained Mace Windu's trust, and Mace Windu has informed Anakin that he has to stay at the Jedi Temple. Meanwhile, Mace Windu takes 3 other Jedi Masters with him. Meanwhile, Yoda, who's been trying to console Anakin about his nightmares and dreams, telling him that he needs to learn to let go and embrace death because it's a natural part of the Force and life. Yoda has been called away along with another contingent of clone troops to Kashyyyk to help the Wookiees against the Separatist droid army. So Yoda's off Coruscant, he's on Kashyyyk. Obi-Wan Kenobi's on Utapau trying to hunt down Grievous. You have other Jedi scattered throughout the galaxy as the Clone Wars is starting to wrap down. And meanwhile, Anakin is just at this point now of conflict, realizing that if Palpatine was to be killed by Mace Windu and the other Jedi Masters, then there's a possibility that Padme may actually die in childbirth if you go by his nightmares, his visions, all of it which is pretty apparently obviously been manipulated by Palpatine himself. There's a very real possibility that Padme was under no harm at all, that she would have given birth and would have been just fine if Anakin would have just sat in the Jedi Temple and just chilled and maybe did some deep meditation and, listened to what Yoda said to him. But no, his emotions get the better of him, as usual of Anakin. It's always his weakness. His emotions regarding his mom and regarding Padme and their unborn child. So he decides to go to the Chancellor's office in order to prevent Palpatine from being killed. Now, his original intention is not to betray the Jedi. It's just simply to make sure that Mace Windu captures Palpatine. But Mace Windu and the other 3 Jedi Masters arrive in the Chancellor's office, and there's a confrontation between Mace and Palpatine, and Mace says finally, you're under arrest. And, Palpatine's like, well, I am the Senate. I'm in charge. You're the ones that are the traitors. And a fight breaks out. And Palpatine's able to quickly dispatch 3 of the Jedi Masters, but not Mace. And I think that in this scenario, you could make the argument that Mace might have been able to defeat Palpatine if Anakin would not have showed up. Some people also make the counter argument that Palpatine was simply playing Mace, only allowing time for Anakin to show up because he knew Anakin was going to be on his way soon, in order to eventually finally force Anakin to make a choice between the Jedi and saving Padme. So you can make that argument either way. But I feel like in this situation, Mace was a good enough Jedi Master to where he could have beaten Palpatine in combat. I think he does beat him. But Palpatine knows that he has an ace up his sleeve, and that ace is Anakin Skywalker. And at this moment, all Anakin wants to do is have Palpatine arrested and stand trial because he wants to save Palpatine's life in order for Palpatine to help save Padme's life. But, 3 Jedi Masters have already been killed. You have the entire Clone Wars that are to be blamed on Palpatine. He's behind it all. And then ultimately, Mace Windu realizes that there is no point in trying and keep Palpatine alive because he's pure evil. Even tries to kill Mace at first with lightning, but Mace repels the lightning back on the Palpatine. Some people argue whether or not it scarred Palpatine or did the lightning simply reveal his true form. That's also debatable. That's the fun thing about some of these movies. You can make the argument either way. And, Palpatine's acting like he's too weak now. But I think this part is he's faking. Like, he still could take out Mace if he wanted to. He could keep Force Lightning him because, Mace didn't have 2 lightsabers at the time. If he had 2 lightsabers, he could have finished off Palpatine right there. But alas, Mace only had 1 lightsaber. But ultimately, Mace, who has always had kind of a balance between the light and the dark side. He's always had, according to lore in Star Wars canon, he's always kind of had a little bit of a dark side to him, but he's been able to use it and fine-tune it in combat and not allow it to control him. Unfortunately, I do think that Palpatine gets the better of Mace here, And you see the dark side of Mace come out, where Mace decides that he's simply going to kill Palpatine, but that forces Anakin to react by chopping off Palpatine's hand. And in that very moment, Palpatine takes advantage of Mace and electrocutes Mace. So Mace loses his hand, and he gets electrocuted with unlimited power right out of the Chancellor's building, allegedly to his demise. And so now there's no turning back for Anakin, and he pledges his loyalty to Palpatine and his teachings in order to save Padme's life. He realizes that he has betrayed the Jedi at this point, that there's no turning back, and he has to side with Palpatine. He has no choice, because Palpatine's the only one promising to save Padme. And so Padme is still in the balance. But whether or not that turns out to work out for Anakin, we'll see. So Darth Sidious, declares Anakin to be Darth Vader. And then that's when Palpatine decides to carry out his little endgame. He orders Anakin, a.k.a. Darth Vader, to head to the Jedi Temple along with the 501st Battalion. As they attack the temple across the galaxy, Palpatine sends Order 66 through clone commanders, and clone commanders like Cody and others start attacking their Jedi generals and start killing them. Like, several of them die throughout the galaxy. It's a good shot, of the Jedi Temple being attacked. I wish they would show more. They would have shown more of that in the movie. Not the younglings scene. I mean, I don't think they needed to show Anakin taking out younglings. That would have been a little too brutal. But it would have been cool if we'd had more, fighting inside the Jedi Temple between the Jedis and the clone troopers and Anakin. I know they had, some holo recordings later on where they show a little bit of that, but they should have mixed a little bit more of that into Episode 3. And I know Shakti dies, on the editing room floor, 2 or 3 times in Episode 3? Poor Shakti. She dies so many times. And she also dies in Force Unleashed. But, yeah, so it's a pretty heartbreaking scene because a lot of Jedi are being killed, including younglings and Padawans. In fact, there's a Padawan that ends up killing a few 501st soldiers before he too gets killed. And, Bail Organa sees all this, and he witnesses firsthand the clone troopers killing and attacking the Jedi Temple. And Obi-Wan manages to escape after he's killed Grievous. And then, of course, Bail, realizing what's happening, that some sort of betrayal has occurred, and he is trying to save as many Jedi as possible. Obi-Wan manages to escape Utapau, and Yoda manages to escape Kashyyyk with the help of General Tulfor, as well as Chewbacca. And they both reunite aboard, the Tantive 4, I think. Is it the Tantive 4, or is it a different one? But they reunite with Bail Organa. Bail Organa informs Obi-Wan and Yoda what the hell's going on. It's like, hey, apparently Jedi are being killed across the galaxy, and that there's some sort of transmission at the Jedi Temple that's a trap that's ordering the Jedi to return to Coruscant because the war's over. Meanwhile, after Anakin has wiped out all the Jedi at the Jedi Temple, including the younglings, Darth Sidious, the Emperor, has ordered Darth Vader to Mustafar to finish off Nute Gunray and the rest of the leadership of the Separatists. So that's where Darth Vader goes, and Bail Organa and all the other senators have been recalled to Coruscant as well for a special session of Congress, where Palpatine basically lays out how the Jedi attempted to assassinate him and overthrow the government and has left him scarred, and therefore he has no choice but to reform the government into the First Galactic Empire and declare himself emperor for a safe and secure society, which is met by thunderous applause. So liberty has died, the Republic is officially gone, and Palpatine is now emperor. And meanwhile, you have Obi-Wan and Yoda fighting into the Jedi Temple, killing off clone troopers, and they see the aftermath. They see the dead Jedi Knights and Masters and Padawans and younglings. And then they change the transmission in order to prevent any other Jedi from dying that have managed to survive. They're still scattered throughout the galaxy. And then Obi-Wan, determined to find out who was responsible for this, because it wasn't just clone troopers. Yoda warns him, only pain you will find if you look into the holotape. Turns out, of course, it was Anakin, and this breaks Obi-Wan's heart. And Yoda seemed to already have a feeling that it was Anakin. And so Yoda's like, well, we have no choice but to destroy the Sith. And Yoda orders Obi-Wan to find out where Anakin went, even though Anakin does not want to fight. Obi-Wan doesn't want to fight Anakin because they're brothers. He trained him. But Yoda realizes that Obi-Wan is no match for Palpatine, and that the only one that can confront Palpatine is Yoda himself. So Yoda heads to the Senate to confront Emperor Palpatine. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan goes to Padme to try and find where Anakin went, because Anakin, after the destruction of the temple, goes back to Padme to try and reassure her that everything's fine, that the Jedi just simply rebelled and were trying to overthrow the government. And you have Anakin loyal to the government, loyal to the Chancellor, and even though he's already gone to the dark side, he's been ordered to Mustafar, and he happens to tell Padme this, and what happens is she refuses to tell Obi-Wan anything, but Obi-Wan deduces that Anakin is Padme's baby daddy, and he sneaks aboard her ship as she flies off to Mustafar, but before she heads off to Mustafar, Darth Vader arrives, and he wipes out Nute Gunray, as well as the remaining leadership of the Separatists. Palpatine orders Darth Vader to have the droids of the Separatist army shut down. And then, of course, Padme arrives. They have a final moment together. And then, of course, she realizes that Anakin has turned to the dark side, that everything that Obi-Wan told her is true. It's breaking her heart. She wants Anakin to run away with her, but he's become so obsessed with the dark side and with power and delusions that he could overthrow the Emperor. And then when Obi-Wan appears, who is now stowaway aboard Padme's ship, Anakin believes that Padme has betrayed Anakin to Obi-Wan in the Jedi. And so he does kind of force choke her. He doesn't kill her, but there's a little bit of force choking happening. And then, of course, Obi-Wan orders Anakin to let Padme go. And I guess what little was left in Anakin does release Padme. And then, of course, they have a back and forth where Anakin blames everything on Obi-Wan and everything on the Jedi. And how, Obi-Wan's still trying to reason with Anakin, realizing he's not going to be able to. An epic fight breaks out between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Great musical score in the background by John Williams. At the same time, you have the fight break out between Yoda and Palpatine. So you have these two awesome fights going back and forth. The leader of the Jedi Order versus the leader of the Sith Order in this epic fight in the Senate, and it was awesome. And equally awesome, if not more so, was the final fight between, well, not the final fight, that comes later, the fight on Mustafar between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And it was a great epic scene, finale. And of course, in the end, Obi-Wan gets the high ground. Anakin gets chopped up a little. He gets burned. Obi-Wan leaves him for dead, takes his lightsaber, as well as, gets Padme, C-3PO, and R2-D2 out of there. And then they regroup with Bail Organa, as well as Yoda, who has failed to defeat Palpatine. Palpatine had the high ground that time. I mean, it was a good fight. It was a close call. It could have probably gone either way between Yoda and Palpatine, but Palpatine wins. He had the high ground. So Palpatine senses that Vader's in danger. He goes to Mustafar. He manages to barely save what's left of Vader, who's now been to, he's had like the rest of his limbs chopped off, because he's already had one chopped off thanks to Dooku in Episode 2, and now he's going to be put into the, the biomechanical cyber suit that we, are best known for. The most iconic look of Darth Vader is the suit that we see him in for the very first time in New Hope. So Vader's now fully Vader now. Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia, and then she dies. And this does not make sense to me, because if you go with Return of the Jedi, when Luke is having a chat with Leia, he asks her about her real mom. Like, do you remember your mom, your real mom? Because I never knew my mom. And she says, yes, I do remember my mom, mostly feelings and stuff, but she was very sad and she died. Now, I always assumed that Padme was going to survive, but obviously she was going to be safely hidden away on Alderaan, and she was going to raise Leia until she died, and then basically Bail and his wife would become Leia's legal guardians. But that's not the case. It's kind of an inconsistency as to what Leia says in Return of the Jedi as opposed to what happens in Episode 3. So I think that I don't know why Lucas did that. Because it's really dumb. Because, like, for reasons we can't explain, we're losing her. I think she still could have given birth to Luke and Leia and still been alive. And they just simply agreed that they had to separate the kids to protect them. But Padme agreed to go with Belle and take Leia with her to Alderaan. And he would hide her and, help. Like, he would be the official legal guardian. But Padme would still be able to help raise her daughter. But after all the events of episode 3, of course, it leaves a negative toll on her. She's just very sad. Her heart's broken because of what Anakin became and with all the destruction that was carried out. And the fact that not only that, even though she's had children, she'll never see her son again, probably. Her son has been sent somewhere else without her knowing. Like, she doesn't know where he went. They had to keep him secret. So I think Lucas could have, in that case, made it work to where it would have aligned a little bit better between Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi. At least with that particular scene between Luke and Leia on the Forest Moon of Endor. Because it doesn't really make sense if you go and look at it from that point of view. So overall, it was really good because it wrapped up the prequel trilogy rather nicely from start to finish. A definitive vision, which I think is important in a trilogy. Not as good as the original trilogy, obviously, but it's good enough in its own right. And a lot more Star Wars fans look upon the prequel trilogy a lot more fondly now than they used to. And credit to Lucas and Dave Filoni for the Clone Wars series, because that really did help flesh out the prequel era, especially the Clone Wars aspect. So you definitely have to, I guess, add the Clone Wars into the prequel era. And if you've never watched the Clone Wars series and you are a prequels fan, I would recommend you check it out. It's on Disney+. The final season's airing right now, so that's just what I'm going to say about that. With the exception of some dialogue issues, which occurred in Episode 2, overall, I would say that Episode 3 was very, very solid. It is easily, in my opinion, the best of the prequel trilogy in Star Wars, and it wraps up the prequel trilogy rather nicely, especially with the way it ends, with Obi-Wan arriving on Tatooine and handing Luke over to Owen and Beru Lars with the sunsets of Tatooine. It was a beautiful ending to the prequel trilogy, and it also leaves a little bit of hope going forward into Episode 4. So where do I rate Revenge of the Sith? On my list of best to worst Star Wars movies, I'm going to put Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, in 4th place. It is the best of the prequels, but obviously I have to put the original trilogy in my top 3. That's a spoiler. So yes, the original trilogy is going into the top 3, but how I rank them, I guess you're going to have to find out whenever I do those review videos coming up. So that's my thoughts, views, and opinions about Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I already did Episode 1, Phantom Menace, as well as Episode 2, Attack of the Clones reviews. You can find those on my channel. And come back next time for my review of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. But until then, feel free and let me know your thoughts, your views, and opinions regarding Star Wars Episode 3, whether you loved it, you hated it, and how do you rank Revenge of the Sith. Feel free and do so below in the comments section.